The Tennessee Titans are 1 week away from roster cutdown day, and I do not have Malik Willis making this roster. I'll explain why on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. It is time for an updated 53-man roster prediction. I'm going to go through the offense on today's show, go through the defense on tomorrow's show, and tell you who I think makes the final cut. On today's episode, I'll tell you why I don't think Malik Willis makes the team, why Jha'Quan Jackson is the one receiver standing alone for that wide receiver 6 spot, and we'll do some tough math with the offensive line. Before I get into it, do want to thank you for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, well, you need to be one. And again, tomorrow we're going to do the defensive side of the ball. The Titans have practice on Wednesday and Thursday. Friday, I'll have a preview for you for the Saints game on Sunday, and then I'll be live on Sunday afternoon after the game ends, and we'll do a preseason run for the Locked On Titans podcast, just like the Titans are doing their preseason run for the regular season. But with all that being said, we got to dive into my 53-man roster predictions. And look, doing the math on the roster is difficult, and that's why I had to make some cuts somewhere. And for me, one of the easy cuts to make on the offensive side of the ball, or not easy, but one of the cuts that needed to be made was Malik Willis. Now, I've just got done breaking down the tape. I am going to have Tuesday, 8 a.m. Eastern on the Tic Tac Titans YouTube channel. I'm going to have a full, probably 30 to 35-minute film breakdown on Malik Willis's performance from Saturday night. And Malik Willis has definitely improved. We've talked about fighting for the backup quarterback competition. We talked about his chances to make the roster, and it's been tough to really decide how I feel throughout the summertime and training camp so far. But after that performance on Saturday night, where Malik Willis was once again a mixed bag. Look, there's a lot of good in there. Couple of seam throws that were really good, couple of curl throws that were really good. There is good in there, but it's just not enough. And the bad is just still a little bit too bad. Okay, so I think Malik Willis could be an option for the Titans on the practice squad. I would want to get Malik Willis back on the practice squad. But if you look at Brian Callahan's time in Cincinnati, they didn't always keep 3 quarterbacks. So I think the Titans only keep 2 quarterbacks here. And again, do you keep Malik Willis or do you keep a 4th tight end? Do you keep Malik Willis or do you keep a 7th wide receiver? Do you keep Malik Willis or do you keep a 9th offensive lineman? Like, those are all decisions that the Titans are going to have to make. And in my opinion, it's pretty simple to go with Will Levis and then Mason Rudolph, and that's your 1 and that's your 2. And then if someone does pick up Malik Willis off waivers and puts him on their 53-man roster, then go ahead by all means. But I think the Titans could get a 3rd quarterback that could run their system better in a pinch and could still be good enough on scout team to where they don't need to waste a roster spot on Malik Willis on the 53-man. I don't think that he's that much more valuable than other 3rd quarterbacks around the NFL that may get cut during cutdown day. That, like, basically it's a risk. You risk losing Malik Willis and getting someone else, but it's not that much of a risk because I don't think Malik Willis is a perfect fit for this system with what he does well and what the Titans are looking to do under Brian Callahan. And I also think there are quarterbacks out there that will be available that are just as good as Malik Willis and are a better fit. So I decided to use that roster spot in a different place on the roster, and I'm willing to run the risk of losing Malik Willis, knowing that I think the other options out there aren't going to be too hateful. So with that being said, 2 quarterbacks for me, Will Levis, Mason Rudolph. Let's talk about the running back spot. Obviously, we have the 2 guys up front, and Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears. That's 2. And then it comes down to, in my opinion, do the Titans keep 3 or do they keep 4? All right, because we know that Hassan Haskins and Julius Chestnut are the next 2 in line. Look, Jabari Small looked good. I would like to get Jabari Small back on the practice squad for the Titans, but he did get a concussion in the game on Saturday night. According to Brian Callahan, he's going to be out on Sunday. And I think the reality here is Jabari Small doesn't offer what Hassan Haskins does on special teams. He isn't as good of a runner right now as Julius Chestnut, and that makes him RB5, and I don't think there's room for 5 running backs on this team. But I will tell you this. People are debating Julius Chestnut, Hassan Haskins, who should the Titans go with? I decided to go with both. So, again, you go back to the Malik Willis thing. Would you rather have Malik Willis or would you rather have Hassan Haskins? Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to scream at your screen right now or scream at your phone. Well, I'd rather have Malik Willis. Well, I don't think that an NFL head coach is going to think that way. All right, because Hassan Haskins is going to be a far more important player on game day. Malik Willis will be the inactive QB3. He'll be the emergency QB3. Hassan Haskins might be the best special teams player on the entire roster. So I know that you're thinking, why would I want to keep Hassan Haskins when he's such a bad running back? He's not a good running back. Look, I've tried to tell you guys, he's great on special teams. He's a good pass protector. He can catch the ball out of the backfield if needed. He's just not a very juicy runner at the end of the day. He doesn't have a lot of juice as a running back. And I've continued to say that quit looking at Hassan Haskins as a running back. Look at him as a special teams dynamo. So to me, would I rather keep Malik Willis as QB3, who's going to be emergency quarterback 3 on game day, or would I rather keep the best special teams player on the entire roster? It's simple to me. You keep the best special teams guy on the roster. And if I got to tell you, if you don't see it like that and you don't think that that is valuable enough, then I don't know what else to say at that point. Like, special teams is more important than you're probably giving it credit for, and coaches care about special teams more than you're probably giving it credit for. Now, Mike Vrabel took that to an extreme, like far to an extreme, but every NFL coach is going to want special teams players on the team who can make an impact, and Hassan Haskins is one of those. But I will also say that I have Julius Chestnut making it as well. I have the Titans going with 4 running backs. You have the top 2 in Pollard and Spears, and then I'm going to keep both Julius Chestnut and Hassan Haskins. Chestnut is run well, and I think that you need that third runner available. The Titans will probably go with that because Haskins is a special teams only player. In my eyes, you don't want Hassan Haskins running the ball. Well, what happens if Spears or Pollard gets banged up? You don't want to all of a sudden then just give all those reps to one guy instead of splitting it. You want to continue to have a little bit of a split, continue to keep your guys fresh. So I think Julius Chestnut and Hassan Haskins. Chestnut is the better runner. Haskins is a special teams player. I think both of those guys make this team. So 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs. We're up to 6. Got to go over to the playmakers. Wide receiver and tight end. How many wide receivers are the Titans going to keep? Who's going to win that battle? I have my answer for you now. Before I get into it, though, I do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you now. Right now, through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. I use FanDuel. I use YouTube TV. It's a fantastic combination, in my opinion. And if you're going to place your $5 bet, Titans plus 4.5 week 1 against the Bears. Just saying. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook. fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, doing part one of my 53-man roster predictions. This is going to be my final one, I do believe. It's going to happen in a week now. We're going to be reacting to the cuts that happen on Tuesday afternoon. So I think this is my final 53-man roster prediction. We got Will Levis, Mason Rudolph. I'm going to cut Malik Willis and try to get him back to the practice squad. We got Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, Julius Chestnut, and Hassan Haskins. I'm going to try to get Jabari Small onto the practice squad. Now, we're going to talk about wide receiver and tight end. Before I get into it, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Football. You're going to get daily insights, the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. It's Locked On Fantasy Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Starting at wide receiver. To me, this is a last man standing situation. This is a survival of the fittest situation at wide receiver. I have continued to say there are 5 wide receivers who are a lock. DeAndre Hopkins, who Brian Callahan said that the Titans expect back soon, so that's good news. Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Treylon Burks, and Nick Westbrook-Akine. Those are the 5. They're making it. Well, recently, in multiple press conferences, Brian Callahan has talked about 6 wide receivers being active on game day. All right. If the Titans are keeping 6 wide receivers, I think 7 would be a little over the top. In my opinion, I don't think they need to keep 7. So they keep 6 wide receivers and 5 are already spoken for. That leaves 1 spot for Kyle Phillips, Kearis Jackson, Mason Kinsey, Jha'Quan Jackson. Those 4 guys. Bryce Oliver has been good, but he's not making the roster. Okay. So it's those 4 guys for 1 spot. And they're all, slot guys. Primarily will be in the slot. Kinsey has played outside this preseason. I think Kearis Jackson could play a little outside as well, but they're primarily fighting over the slot spot because, as Brian Callahan has also said, Treylon Burks is playing the X, NWI is playing the Z. So if you have Burks behind Hopkins as the X, you have NWI behind Ridley as the Z, the last guy needs to be a backup slot guy. Okay? So all of those dudes could be in the running, those 4 guys. To me, it's simple. Jha'Quan Jackson has won this race. Kyle Phillips has the hamstring injury. I think they'll put him on practice squad if they can. I think Kyle Phillips gets picked up, though, by another team, ultimately. Kearis Jackson has a bone bruise on his knee. He's probably going to be out for a minute. And Brian Callahan even mentioned that that's something that can linger into the season, so they want to let him heal up. I wouldn't be surprised if Kearis Jackson is out quite some time. Mason Kinsey broke his pinky. And look, the Mason Kinsey story is good. He's just not going to make the 53-man roster. I want him on practice squad. He can get called up by the team, all those different things. Like, I'm okay with Mason Kinsey having a role within this organization. I like that. Okay? But he just isn't a guy who should be making the 53-man roster. They would have to keep 7. And I'm sorry, but Kyle Phillips is still a better player than Mason Kinsey. And if you have Jha'Quan Jackson as your primary punt returner, and you don't have to, Mason Kinsey, if Jha'Quan Jackson is the primary punt returner, then what's Mason Kinsey on the roster for? He would only make the roster if he is the starting punt returner. So if Jha'Quan Jackson is punt returning, then Kyle Phillips is the better receiver over Mason Kinsey, and Phillips would make the team. But I don't think they're going to keep 7. So again, to me, it's the 6. The 5 that we know, the 5 locks, and then Jha'Quan Jackson, Jet Jackson, the rookie. And he was excellent. Speaking, I'm having my Malik Willis film breakdown, which will be up Tuesday, 8 a.m. on the Tic Tac Titans film channel. Link for that is down below in the description. Get subscribed to that channel. You're not going to want to miss all the film content I'm doing this year to pair up with this podcast. You are really not going to want to miss that. But I'm going to do a Jha'Quan Jackson film breakdown on Wednesday. And then I'm going to do Jalen Harrell on Thursday. So Jha'Quan Jackson was awesome in this game, and he could have had over 100 yards and a touchdown, too, if Malik Willis would have thrown the passes. So Jha'Quan Jackson really has done a great job these last few weeks. So that's my 6 wide receivers. So up 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers. That's 12. And then we go to tight end. In my opinion, the top three are locks: Josh Whyle, Chig, Nick Van Ette. They're locks to make the team. No doubt about it. The question is, will the Titans keep 4? And Brian Callahan talked about this in his press conference on Sunday. He basically said, when we cut down the roster, we're not just trying to check boxes. Like, we have this many guys here, we have this many guys here. We want to keep the best players. We want to keep the best players. We're not going to just be like, hey, we have to have this many guys here. We got to no. We're going to keep the best players, is what Brian Callahan was saying. And he was also, within that question, saying that they absolutely could afford to keep 4 tight ends. He was asked, can you afford to keep that many tight ends? And he's like, yeah, again, we're not just checking boxes of how many people. We want to keep the best players. So if we think somebody is going to be a good player, we're going to keep them. And that's why I think the Titans keep 4 tight ends. I think David Martin Robinson makes this team. I think he's shown enough in the preseason that he would get picked up by another team. Look, David Martin Robinson has wiggle out of the backfield. He's got the ability to catch the ball, break a tackle, get upfield. He did it on the game-winning drive for the Titans in the preseason. He's done it a few games in a row now where he catches those drag routes underneath, breaks a tackle, and gets upfield for more. I think that the Titans have Josh Whyle, who is your classic Y tight end, and Nick Van Ette, who is also a classic Y tight end. You have Chig, who is your classic move tight end, your F, your H style guy. And the Titans don't have a direct backup for him. So I would keep David Martin Robinson, and he can be the direct backup to Chig. And I think that David Martin Robinson has the ability to develop here because he is bigger than Chig. And I think that he would be able, because he's bigger and stronger as a man, he might be able to be a better blocker than Chig. Now, he doesn't have the speed or elusiveness or that sort of pop like Chig, but I think their skill sets are similar enough, and the Titans can develop David Martin Robinson throughout the year, and he could replace Nick Van Ette as their number 3 tight end by the end of the year or into next year. I just think that he's a good player, and I don't think that you should give up on David Martin Robinson and risk letting him go to another team on waiver claims or just go to another team because he wants to. I think the Titans keep David Martin Robinson. So that's 4 tight ends. So 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers, 4 tight ends. We're up to 16 players on offense. Also, let me just say this. Thomas Odukoye, practice squad. The Titans get a practice squad exemption because he's an international pathway player. He's from the international pathway program. So in my mind, the Titans are just going to keep Thomas Odukoye as the 17th man on their practice squad when normally you could only keep 16, and that lets them have an extra player around as well. And that's what the Titans have been doing with Thomas Odukoye. He's been with the team for multiple years now, and they just never put him on the 53 because honestly, he's not good enough, but they like to keep him around because he's an extra body and he helps them have an extra player on the roster. That may sound harsh, I guess, but it is a reality. It is a reality. So, the Titans can have 91 guys on their roster right now, not 90. They can have 17 on their practice squad, not 16, by keeping Thomas Odukoye around under the IPP exemption. So, he's going to go to practice squad. I think Steven Stellanos is just cut. Overall, Colton Dowd, PYP, Sam Schnee, I guess it's Schnee, not Schnee. He's going to be cut. And hopefully Bryce Oliver ends up on practice squad. And Treshaun Harrison, I think, ends up getting cut as well. But that's 16 players. Let's talk offensive line. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast, part 1 of my final official 53-man roster predictions. We've gone through all of the skill positions on offense: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. I'm up to 16 players that I've kept on the roster now, but the offensive line makes the math very, very difficult. Before I get into it, do want to thank you again for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Football. Again, you're going to get daily insights, the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. I got a little Locked On Fantasy Football bonus episode or special episode with a couple of special guests maybe here in the next few weeks, but you got to check out Locked On Fantasy Football to get ready for your drafts, guys. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So again, the math is difficult on the offensive line. It truly is. Throughout this offseason and throughout training camp so far, it has been my opinion that the Titans will keep 9 offensive linemen. Okay, they want to have depth there. But as I've watched the preseason games, I just simply don't think that there are 9 people worth keeping. I just don't think it's necessary. And I went back and forth, and I'll tell you the name I went back and forth on here. But obviously you have the 5 starters. J.C. Latham, Peter Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry, Dylan Radins, NPF. And Brian Callahan said at his press conference on Sunday that things are trending towards Dylan Radins and NPF being the starters. He said that those are the guys that have been performing the best. So, hey, I love my boy Andrew Rupcich. I think he's a good player, but looks like Radins and NPF have locked down the right side at this time. Not unexpected. That was after after Sadiq Charles retired. That's been the expectation. The Dylan Radins and NPF will be the starters there. But after that is where things get difficult. I personally think even though Jalen Duncan played over him in the preseason game, Jha'Quan Christian is the primary backup tackle on this team. Why do I think that? Because when J.C. Latham got a cramp in practice this week, it was Christian who went at left tackle for him. Jalen Duncan played left tackle with the second string, and I think that the reason for that is they wanted to see how third string players all get cut. Second string players are the only players who actually go with the team. So if you want to get a final good look at Jalen Duncan before you cut him, you put him out there against the second stringers and see how he does. And it was not a good performance from Jalen Duncan. So to me, Jha'Quan Christian is the number 1 backup tackle. He is the swing tackle on this team. So that's my number 6. And then I got Andrew Rupcich. Rupcich had rotated in with Dylan Radins at time during practice with the 1 so that they could get a look at him with the starters. While I think that he is not going to beat out Dylan Radins at this point and should not beat out Dylan Radins at this point, he has still done enough to make this roster. He's the best guard, best backup guard. He can play left guard. He can play right guard. He is the best backup guard that the Titans have. So Rupcich makes the team. Then it's clearly Daniel Brunskill. Daniel Brunskill can play guard too, so it gives the Titans extra versatility there. If they needed to, like NPF gets hurt, you could always kick Brunskill to right guard and Radins to right tackle. You know, like if there's a huge calamity, Radins has the ability to play a little bit of tackle. So if you have 2 backups who are both interior guys, that works out great. Dylan Radins can be, you have Jha'Quan Christian as your primary swing tackle. Dylan Radins is your backup tackle. And then you have Brunskill who can play center or guard and Rupcich who can play either guard spot. You are totally covered with your 8 guys with all of your spots, no matter what you need to do. You have 2 backup tackles. Again, Radins could kick out there, and then Christian. And 2 backup interior guys with Brunskill and Rupcich. Rupcich can play either guard. Brunskill can play guard or center. It's perfect. So that's the math. Now, I will tell you that I debated John Ojukwu. I did. I almost cut David Martin Robinson and kept John Ojukwu as a 9th offensive lineman. I still think that could happen. Okay? But ultimately, I really don't think that John Ojukwu is good enough to have a 53-man roster spot. I don't. And I also think that the Titans will not worry about John Ojukwu getting picked up off waivers, and they'll get him back on the practice squad. So with that in mind, I only kept 8 offensive linemen. Now, that means Corey Levin didn't make the cut. I don't know The practice squad rules have changed so much in the last few years. I think you can have 4 veteran players on practice squad, no matter what their years of service is. There used to be a cap on that. Like if you had more than 3 years of service, you couldn't be on a practice squad, period. But they've changed those rules recently, and I think it's 3 or 4 guys can have any amount of experience. You could take a guy who's been in the NFL 15 years and put him on the practice squad. So I think that's where it's at now. So I think you get Corey Levin back on the practice squad. You get Jha'Quan on the practice squad. And then I really like Cole Spencer as well. And I think Cole Spencer, the undrafted free agent out of Texas Tech, I think he's been impressive in the preseason playing against third string. He's been at right guard. He's a guy who the Titans spent a ton of time with in the pre-draft process. So they really liked him and were really interested in him. And I think that Cole Spencer comes back on the practice squad because he knows that he has the opportunity to continue to develop here. I think that Cole Spencer could be like a starting guard for the Titans within the next 2 or 3 years. Like this season, next season, the season after. I think we could look up one day and be like, Cole Spencer is starting right guard for the Titans. He needs a little more time to develop, but they clearly like him. There's something there with the way he's played in the preseason. I get Cole Spencer back on the practice squad with no question about it. You know what I mean? But again, some of these decisions, do you keep David Martin Robinson or do you keep Jha'Quan or do you keep Malik Willis? Do you get rid of David Martin Robinson and instead keep Mason Kinsey, Kyle Phillips as your 7th wide receiver? Do you cut Hassan Haskins because you don't care about the special teams value because he can't be a running back, and then you keep Malik Willis? These are all questions that the Titans are going to have to answer in the next few days. I've given you guys my answers. I'm curious to know what your answers are. Where would you cut at certain positions? What would you keep? I have 24 guys that I kept on the offensive side of the ball. Same as my last prediction. The numbers are different at different positions, but it's still 24 guys. And I'm keeping 26 on defense, which I'll be discussing on tomorrow's show. But with that, that's going to do it for me today, folks. As I tell you guys, thumbs up on the video, tighten up down in the chat. I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.